This is a reading from the prophet Isaiah from chapter 9. Very familiar words, just right for Advent leading into Christmas. The people walking in darkness have seen a great light. On those living in the land of deep darkness, a light has dawned. You have enlarged the nation and increased their joy. They rejoice before you as people rejoice at the harvest, as warriors rejoice when dividing the plunder. For as in the day of Midian's defeat, you have shattered the yoke that burdens them, the bar across their shoulders, the rod of their oppressor. Every warrior's boot used in battle and every garment rolled in blood will be destined for burning, will be fuel for the fire. For to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulders. And he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Of the greatness of his government and peace there will be no end. He will reign on David's throne and over his kingdom, establishing and upholding it with justice and righteousness from that time on and forever. The zeal of the Lord Almighty will establish this. Isaiah promised a Messiah, a chosen one who would be sent by God to sort things out. Now, people really needed to hear good news because things were in a mess. There was a threat of invasion and war, and so they were desperate. You can imagine them pleading, when? How long? Like the cry of the children in the car, are we there yet? Not yet, just wait. God's timing is perfect. Timing, eh? Right, okay. My mother used to have the most incredible sense of timing. She'd see me come into the room, she'd watch me about to sit down, and as the bottom descended towards the chair and reached that point at which no force of nature can force it to stop, and I was going to hit the seat within the next half second, she'd say, before you sit down, yeah, thanks, Mum. In the same way, just as I was about to settle down to watch something on TV, I've done my homework, I've come in, put the telly on, Blue Peter in 30 seconds, you know, the sort of thing. The voice would come from the kitchen. Have you tidied that room? I'll do it after this. Do it now, and then you can watch TV. Now, tidy your room. To a child, as far as I was concerned, that just meant moving things around. And what needed to be moved depended on what the other sentence in the instruction was. If it was, I don't know how you can get into that bed, then it was a case of move the stuff off the bed, put it on the chair. If it was, I can't see your floor, I can't see your chair, I can't see the top of your drawers, well, you move the stuff off there. 30 seconds later, job done, back in front of the telly. Yeah, right. Then would come the voice of doom from the kitchen. You can't have done that room properly. I have? I'm gonna check. Right. You have to visualize this. My mother was 5 foot and round. Yeah. She'd stomp down the landing, stand in the bedroom doorway, hands on hips. She'd survey the chaos in the bedroom. The fact you could see the bed, never mind, I tidied that. No, she'd look at it and her eyes would narrow. Then would come what we called Jessie's battle cry. Adivana, Jessie, if you want out deeing, dee it yourself. Now, that was the moment at which everybody took cover. Dad said he'd walk the dog. We didn't have a dog. That didn't matter. He was out. If you stood still for more than 2 seconds, you'd be tidied up and put on a shelf or shoved in a drawer or something. Mum went into a cleansing frenzy. Do you remember that advert for Flash? You know, the white tornado? That was my mum. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. All done. Yeah, okay. She'd do it herself because, as far as she was concerned, none of the rest of us could do it quite the way she wanted. Now, to a certain extent, that comes to mind because of Isaiah's promise and what was hoped for and looked for. God's problem was nobody else could get it quite right. I mean, follow the story from the beginning. He'd given Adam and Eve this lovely garden to live in, paradise. This is it. Simple instructions on what to do and what not to do. They blew it. He'd given Israel a law from Sinai, detailed. This is it. This is what you've got to do. They broke every single commandment. They blew it. He kept on trying. He'd spoken to generation after generation after generation through the prophets, promising, challenging, encouraging, threatening, appealing. They were either ignored or rejected. They blew it again. So it seemed as if the only way that God was going to save his people was by rolling up his sleeves and doing it himself. That had to be done right, and it had to be done at the right time. Isaiah could see that God would send somebody, he would send the right one to do the job. But what he was looking at was a sign, just a sign to what God was going to do in the long term, because he was looking for something then, in 750 something BC. If people had said to him, when's God going to send this Messiah? And he said, about 700 years. Right. Thanks, Isaiah. Don't call us, we'll call you. But God's timing was right. There was someone sent to Israel then who was the one that God needed there and then to begin to put things right. But that was just a pointer to what he was going to do in the long run. God's timing was right. He knew just how and when to act. And that's what he did at Christmas. God became one of us. He took on our weak, fallible flesh. He lived in the face of the same problems. He took the sins of the world on his own shoulders. He took them to the cross, and there he destroyed them. The baby in the manger is a miracle. A miracle because he is a sign of hope, the beginning of salvation. He was the promise of a bigger, better, brighter future. He was the guarantee that God is committed to the future of his creation, of his people, of his human race. Committed enough to become one of us, to actually get right down into our darkness and to set us free. And that's why, if you read the letter to the Hebrews, he's got it. He starts in exactly the right place. In many and various ways, God spoke of old to our fathers by the prophets. But in these last days, he's spoken to us by a son.